Well, let's get to you come back from China.
Mhm.
I know you went to Egertain for a little bit, so you can touch on that as well. Still being involved with Asia as a region that you're responsible for, and then that leading into Canterra, which I mean, Canterra is on the map these days because of David Hansen. So I would love to hear about that and that process and how everything you learned kind of went into that stage of your career.
It was a very interesting transition. Again, if I back up for a second, I mentioned very earlier in this conversation is how much enjoyment I've had with working with farmers.
Yep.
Um, I have discovered through time and experience, and yourself, Rhett, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. A farmer is a farmer is a farmer. And whether and whatever point in the world you want to go to, no matter whether they farm 40,000 acres or whether they farm a couple moo in China, you have the same conversations with farmers, and it's about the weather, it's about commodity prices, it's about government policies, it's about technology, etc. And it doesn't matter, like the scale and scope doesn't change the conversations, right? So just environment might be different, or crop types might be different, etc. So I've always had that lean and that slant, and I've enjoyed the managing the businesses and being part of the leadership as much as anything through time. It didn't happen overnight. It took a long time to there. Working with different size of organizations was an eye opener for me as well. So you work for the large life science multinationals. I worked for the global commodity companies. I worked for, even if you want to consider Delta and Pineland was a regional company that had,
Yep.
created an international business opportunity because, we're in the cotton business. Who else is moving cotton? Let's expand here. So I seen them as kind of a quasi multinational. I mean, they didn't like talking about their international business, for many different reasons because it impacted what they were doing in the U.S. But they did play in different areas in there. So in the coming back to Canada and having an opportunity to go for a farmer owned smaller regional business was enticing. I wanted to be able to do something that maybe I could put a fingerprint on than I could if when I'm working for a multinational where you're in a silo, you do this and you do that, and that none of that's wrong. But if you're going to do something and you want to make an impact, you've got to be on a leadership role type of thing. So my impressions of Canterra Seeds, I'll be honest, before I went to Canterra Seeds was not great. It took a number of meetings with different people to ask me to give proper consideration to assuming this role or taking on this responsibility, so to speak. And people that I had a lot of experience and trust and relationships with. And so that sounds really arrogant, ignorant, and it's not meant to be. It was just image and what I saw from the outside looking in.
Right.
And I didn't know any of I knew a few people who had been at Canterra, but I didn't really know many. I did know some of
Yeah.
the directors, but if I could just fast forward, I'll come back. But it was one of the best decisions I ever made to join that organization. I was provided with the opportunity to do what I thought was best for the organization, and to do what we could to move it forward, to grow the business, to make it something of substance. It'd been it wasn't a new company. It had already gone through a lot of trials and tribulations, but it was the only farmer owned seed entity in Canada that had survived. There's many other grower companies that had come and gone for very, very different reasons, but it wasn't that Canterra wasn't on the brink a couple times, but it did hang on, and I that was quite a feat, I thought. When you're working in a world of giants.
Yep.
I've said forever, I mean, and I've alluded to that, it's always about people. And, I had the luxury when I first walked in the door of a lot of really top drawer people. And,
Yeah.
small company, small organization. And I reflect back on, when I was thinking I've got to meet the staff, nobody knows who I am, et cetera. I don't know who they are, et cetera, like that. But I did understand that there had been, issues in and around governance. I think was a challenge. The board was maybe a little too active, involved in day-to-day operations, and so through some good conversations with the executive as far as the board went, and kind of laying a path forward on how this needed to work going, to ensure that we get away from some of those problems. And some of those problems were long in the tooth, but we managed to change that relatively quickly. But I think defining who we were early in stages of the business is that we were a sales organization, and that meant that everything that we did, everything that we thought about was related to sales. We weren't an admin company, we weren't an R&D company. I mean, we weren't a marketing company. We were a sales organization. And so we weren't selling, we didn't have a business. The other thing that was different about us, we had these models where we had a canola business, and then we had a cereals business, and cereals and pulses, and they needed to be managed separately together under one umbrella. So we were lacking brand awareness. We were lacking a bunch of, positioning issues, etc. So again, when you're working as everything is in licensed, whether it's traits, whether it's genetics, it everything that we attach to its seed treatments, everything that we do is through relationships, whether it's a seed grower, whether it's a seed conditioning, whether it's seed treating, whether it's transportation, logistics. You're having to bring all these people together to do something for the farm customer, right? And adding value, right? I mean, and so it was all about relationships, both inward and outward, right, in order to keep this business going.
Yeah.
And I mean, as we were starting to build a brand and making sure we were aligning ourselves with the right organizations, the like-minded ones through the whole value chain, and I think that's what really helped Canterra be where it is today. It is a very different business. It has gone from a 15, 20 million to 80 plus type of, so
Yeah.
it is growing and holding its own. There's not an easy day over there.
Yeah.
That model can be duplicated. It hasn't been successfully. Others have tried. Even some of the life science companies have tried using that model and had difficulty and exited it. So I think that it got down to having the right people in the right places, and really in empowering them to do their jobs. A small business, you've got to be pretty nimble.
Yeah.
You get to be nimble when you're a small company. We can make decisions a lot quicker than some of the other ones.
Which, I mean, again, I get back to like that seems to be something you've learned throughout your career and practiced in each spot. China would seem like a big place, but like that was a small business in a big place.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
So I would,
I remember trying to have those explanations, or especially with our corporate group in the U.S. and they're saying, well, our market share is this, we're doing this and doing that, and you need to, we should be doing more, right? I said, well, let me help you out with this thing here, right? I mean, we sell a kilo of seed on average to a grower, right? And we're selling 3,000 tons of seed. That's
yeah,
3 million kgs. That means we have 3 million farm customers. I've got 7 people who are out selling seed, and they're using bicycles and trains to go visit their distributors, never mind retail or the grower. And I'm
yeah,
saying, so like how, in a country that's, larger than
yeah,
Canada.
yeah,
So you start doing the numbers, but
yeah. No, 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 no. It is fascinating. Let's talk about succession. So it's been a hot up issue just in farming, from farmland, etc. But also a small company like yourself. Very rarely does anyone do that well, or be able to kind of do it on their terms. And I've read a lot on this. We've talked about it, but talk through that process just for the rest of us to learn from that. Other companies, other people, of like, when did you have the foresight for that? How did that process go? because I think it was a fairly, I mean, I read about 2 years, but it might have been even longer where you kind of planned this out.
So the answer is yes and no. So first off, I will go back to, your value of your team and your people, right? So one thing that we were always focused on was making sure we had the right people in the right place.
Yep.
And at the right time. I mean, and so you look at your entire staff, and I don't care whether you're a company like Canterra, you got 30 or 40 people, or you got 400 or 4,000, but you have to be in touch and in tune with who's doing what and where and why. And I've always believed very much in flat organizations. I mean, strategically, I mean, that can be challenging, but I think from ego perspectives and all those sorts of things is that every job within an organization is critically important. Every job, whether it's right from the receptionist, who greets people walking in the door as your customers, as suppliers, etc., to the CEO. So just flatten that sort of thinking out. And then you want to make sure you've got your building people where they can be successful in their own right, both professionally and personally, because I think those things are also critically important. And you make sure you look after your people. I mean, that's first and foremost. As you start to look through this, you see people who are really comfortable doing what they're doing. There's lifetime career salespeople that are out there. They started when they were first year out of university, and they will retire in that role, right? They weren't interested in moving up or managing people. They might, early stages, you think everybody wants to manage people, and that's not true, right? I mean, so you have to decide, and you have to be aware that there are ones that want to lead, some want to follow, some just want to be part of the pack, and
Mhm.
so some that have the aspirations, you can see that they want to learn, they want to grow, they want to take on more responsibility. What do they need? What are they going to need in order to be successful, right? And so you're matching opportunity again with small companies, is that flat organizations, it's difficult to elevate people, right? So you're having to grow the business and then move people along with the business, and create those opportunities. And when I came into Canterra, we had a change of senior management through that time period that I was there. And as I was moving along, and I made it clear to my board what my 6'5" was a marker, right? I didn't wait until 3 weeks before. I let them know a good 2+ years, 2.5 years ahead of time. And the logic of that being is that that's only two turns, right? I mean, and this ag world, I mean, for the majority of it, some areas you might have two, but for the most part, especially in our part of the world, you have one turn, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this gave the board an opportunity to say, well, what do they want to do? Where do they think they should be going? And give them time to figure that out. I mean, and boards, you have to appreciate, they think about business 4 times a year when they walk in to the next board meeting. So, the committees and all the rest of it. So they needed to have the time to think about what they were wanting to do. And then, I was there to help provide thoughts and inputs, etc., because it wasn't my call in rehiring. Like, it was, I mean, this is a board function to hire the
Right.
CEO, not the CEO's role, right? I
Yeah.
provided my thoughts, input, guidance, and with the concept that whatever successor is coming in will be smarter than me, more experienced, and will take this business to the next two or three, four levels higher, right? I mean, you don't want another Dave Hansen. That you do not, and no organization does. And I think CEOs maybe stick around longer than they should, but I believe that you're looking for something brighter, better, etc. The board's challenge was, when it got down to it, there were a few people within the organization that were all equally prepared, capable,
Hmm.
competent, experienced, that were ready to go forward with it. So they were cognizant through multiple conversations with staff. The culture of Canterra was really important, really
Hmm.
important. And we've talked about culture in business. Well, culture runs through every organization, through every company. And the people that were within our business, in the business, are the reasons that it was growing and successful.
Yeah.
Let's not rock the boat. You want to bring in people that can take it to other levels, but let's not dismantle the culture, because that could mean a wholesale change on people, right?
Right.
And so the staff, I mean, were they loyal to Dave? That's all kind of good for the ego. But what
Yeah.
what they really appreciated was the culture. They liked how they were treated and respected, and part of the solution rather than being part of the problem. And
Yeah.
so the company, was looking externally. They looked at the whole pool. I mean, you want to cast a net and see what's out there. But at the end of the day, because they had the time, and the transition and all the rest of it, is that they chose internally. And I didn't wish that decision making on anyone, because there was some, like I said, more than one. And
Yeah.
so it would have been a tough decision, and they made it. I was not part of that decision, but like I said, I was allowed to weigh in and talk about a few different things. But yeah.
Well, hopefully, I think what you're getting to is you helped establish a culture there.
Mhm.
That culture, if you pick the right people to steer the ship moving forward, will stay intact, right? So that's the legacy that you want to make sure stays
Yeah.
intact, because that's what the secret sauce is for that business. So, very good.
Yeah.
Well, an
Well,
hour's
there was, sorry, just one last thing too. I mean, as part of the growth of the company, one of the major accomplishments that we were able to manage was the partnership with Lima Grain, and the creation of Lima Grain Cereals Canada, and that is a critically important long-term strategic move that it was going to allow for the creation, or for the development of our cereals business in a much bigger way. That's been, a while in the making, so it goes back almost 10 years. But plant breeding is an 8-10 year process, and
yeah,
regulatory and registration issues aside,
yeah,
that relationship has also been very important to the growth of the organization, and will continue to be.
awesome. And you obviously helped kind of pioneer that through.
Had a little had a
You're
little,
wrong word.
had a little bit to do with it, yes.
Yeah. Tell me about, so I know hours flown by. This has been awesome. I think I've taken a few things from this that I did not know coming in. One was not necessarily a farm kid, which I love, because it always comes to where, we're a farm company too. We're looking for Aggies, etc. And I can't tell you the amount of people, and now a person like yourself, where I can go, you know what, they didn't start out in a farm, and they're now a farm kid, right? So, right, you became, speaking of culture, you were attracted to that culture, and it became part of you, right? Second was the story about education, right? Story about this does not look the same way. To reach these higher levels in our industry does not all look the same path, which I think also gets to, if it's something that makes you a little bit of afraid, but you're curious, go for it. Whether that's an international opportunity, or an opportunity just in a different type of job or industry, etc. I think those are all things that I can take away from today. But like, to some things, that sums things up. But on your side, did I miss any other questions or things that you would love to add? People that have impacted you, lessons that you've had along the way before we finish things up here?
Well, I mean, it's always, I mean, again, I go back to the value of people, and I have been very fortunate to have worked with a lot of people that I learned an awful lot from, and I respected and regarded very highly. But two people that really do stand out, three people that really stand out in my career. One is a guy named Kim McConnell. And Kim and I go back into the early days of Hyola 40, Hyola 401. And I still remember the day he walked in my office and stuck out his hand and told me who he was and what he might be able to do for us. And that was all new experiences for me. And I could write another whole book on what we didn't know about marketing back in those days. Rhett, this was days before strip trials, but before a sign was put up in the ground, before you'd have field
Yeah,
days with farmers. We didn't do any of that stuff prior. Not we, I mean, as an industry, that was, I know it's hard to believe, but again,
yeah,
you know, Kim really helped open my eyes on things we could do. And then again, my connections to the US also was a big learning, because a lot of what we're doing in Western Canada were things I
Yeah.
learned from Garst and ICI Seeds in the US. And so
Yeah.
again, cultural differences, etc. So Kim has been, continues to be a number of things to me. One, most important, he's a very dear friend.
Yeah.
Secondly, he's somebody I have very, very high regards for, and his experience and his passion for this industry is contagious. You cannot sit in a room with with Kim McConnell and not get excited about agriculture. I mean, even if you've never known agriculture, Kim's going to make sure you know it. So
And
he's
still very involved.
yeah.
Still very involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and somebody a little bit later in my career, but it was Mike Frank. And Mike and I mean, we share our love for Saskatchewan, and but having him as my coach when I was still working in Asia really opened my eyes to, one was the benefits and values of working for a large organization as I did back then. Him as a person, him as a leader, as a strategist, his technical competencies, but still his people skills and his ways of which he would lead, etc., was really helpful for me. And I wish I had worked with Mike a lot earlier. Your
Right.
dad is on my list. Len and I became familiar back in the when he was working on the chem side of ICI. I was working with ICI
Yeah.
Seeds, and I had an opportunity to and needed somebody with Len's experience to help me with the eastern part of the business, and that just opened up the world. And your dad is I don't need to tell you what your dad is, but he's a very grounded guy. He's not about the flash and dash. He's just real stuff. He's
Yeah.
brilliant. He's smart. He's articulate, and he knows what he's talking about. And he knows that we don't need to be taking ourselves so seriously. This world is bigger than we are. So
Yeah.
he's been very influential. And there's others that are certainly on my list of people that have influenced me, but it's all been very, very good. The other aspect of life in for Dave Hansen has been about the younger generation and the kids. And so I've spent, again, I go back to Kim. He's the one who opened the
Yeah.
door of opportunity for me to join the board at 4-H, and another good friend of mine, Todd Klink. And again, it's always about the people and joining that organization. Again, non-ag guy. I was a Boy Scout, and that
Yeah.
sort of 4-H was a
Yeah.
non-entity in where I grew up. But it
Right.
wasn't long after coming to the prairies that I started to appreciate what 4-H was, and having a semblance of ideas and concepts of the organization. But until I was actually on the board did I really have a full appreciation of it. My
Yeah.
motivation, of course, is 5 grandkids and 2 son-in-laws who grew up in 4-H, and it was all about beef and learn
Yeah.
by doing. And I really found that really helpful in what is meaning about us telling our story about where our food comes from. It's teaching kids about work ethic. It's teaching them how to speak properly. It's teaching them, to learn by doing and to be brave, and building their confidence. And those are all our future leaders. And those, I know those are buzzwords, but they really are. I go to these conferences and I see these young people, and you just can't come out of there without being excited and saying we're in a better place. So I had the good fortune of joining the board. I was vice chair for a couple of years, and I just completed my chair and role, and I will be another couple of years as past chair. And knowing that I will time out, because the governance, there are timelines. It's very, very solid in how all this works out. But I've also now participating with Ag in the Classroom and sitting on the Ag in the Classroom Manitoba board. And again, it's there's a lot of similarities and a lot of differences about what the purposes are and what their agendas are. But it is about youth, and it is about teaching them where their food comes from. It is about teaching them that there are career opportunities that are far and wide that most people have no real great appreciation for. And I'm preaching to the converted, but it's we've got to have systems, and we've got to have knowledge that is handed down through our teachers to our kids, and make agriculture an option for them. and again, agribusiness. I mean, it's a big field, right? So 1 in 8 jobs
Absolutely.
in Canada is ag-related, and most people they don't have a clue where their meat or lettuce comes from. So we've got a lot to teach in that area. So I think I have a passion to see our youth provided with the tools and knowledge and information early on, and let's not wait till they get to university when they're
Right.
making career decisions. Career decisions start really years
Yep.
before.
Yep. No, well said. I can't sum up things better than that. And there's two great organizations when you're in the industry too. I'd also throw CAMA in there as another good opportunity. So there's your call to action for anyone listening to this. And we'll actually put the websites in here so people can go to 4-H or Ag in the Classroom and or CAMA just to learn more and know you don't have to be an Aggie to get involved in those organizations. There's plenty of different ways to do it. So
Rhett,
uh,
you hit the nail on the head before. I mean, as we're building out our businesses and always looking for the right people and good people, etc. And if you walk into the doors of the ag colleges today versus where it was 50 years ago, and I look at numbers and stats not because I was sitting in the classroom, but the people that are in the classroom today are not the same demographic that they were 50 years ago, right? And it's changed in two ways. It's changed in gender and it's changed in geography. They're not all coming from the farm anymore. They are coming in from other disciplines or other experiences in life, etc. We must be doing something right, and certainly, thankfully, a real change in gender as well. So, I mean, it's so good progress on the HR factors when it comes to agriculture. So,
yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there slowly, but we're getting there. So,
absolutely,
but absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I know we went a little bit over, but do appreciate everything. Great learning for folks, great learning for me. And just thanks for being part of this. And we'll definitely see you at the next ag event down the road.
Rhett, thanks very much. Great to have this opportunity to have a conversation with you. So, I know I speak too much, talk too much, but anyways, I do appreciate this more than you know. So, thank you.